In 1750, the German philosopher Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz wrote, "Everything that happens, happens exactly as it should, and the reason for this lies in the nature of things." This optimistic view of the world stands in stark contrast to the complex and often tumultuous history of ancient Israel. The biblical narrative, a cornerstone of Western civilization, has long been revered as a divine and infallible account. However, modern historical and archaeological research has begun to peel back the layers of this revered text, revealing a more nuanced and often surprising reality. For centuries, the stories of the Old Testament have been accepted as historical fact. Abraham, the patriarch who left his homeland to follow a divine call; Moses, the leader who led his people out of Egyptian slavery; and David, the king who built a mighty empire. These figures have been etched into the collective memory of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. But what happens when we look beyond the familiar tales and into the historical and archaeological evidence? The results are both fascinating and, at times, unsettling. The patriarchal narratives in Genesis, the stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, form the bedrock of Israelite identity. These stories describe a lineage that stretches back to Mesopotamia, and a people who were not native to the land they eventually came to inhabit. The Bible presents these patriarchs as successive generations, each building upon the legacy of the last. However, modern scholarship suggests that these stories may be more complex than they appear. Some scholars argue that the patriarchal narratives reflect the folk memories of different groups of people, who later coalesced into the nation of Israel. For example, while the Bible portrays Abraham as coming from Ur in Mesopotamia, other traditions suggest that some of Israel's ancestors came from the West, from Egypt. These differing origins are not necessarily contradictory, but may represent the merging of distinct groups with their own histories and traditions. The names of the patriarchs themselves provide a clue. Names like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are not typical of later Israelite naming practices, suggesting that they may indeed be from an earlier period. However, the customs and practices described in these stories, such as passing a wife off as a sister to avoid death, are more reflective of later Israelite norms. This suggests that while the names and some elements of the stories may be ancient, the narratives themselves were likely compiled and edited much later, during the period of the Judges or even the monarchy. The Exodus from Egypt is one of the most dramatic and significant events in the biblical narrative. The story of Moses leading the Israelites out of slavery and into the Promised Land has inspired countless generations. But how much of this story is rooted in historical reality? The Mernep, to steal, discovered in Thebes in 1896, provides the earliest known mention of Israel, dated to around 1215 BCE. The stele suggests that a people called Israel was already present in Palestine during the 13th century. However, the stele offers no details about this group, and Israel is never mentioned again in ancient Egyptian texts. This raises questions about the nature and size of the group that eventually became the Israelites. The names associated with the Exodus, such as Moses, Aaron, and Phinehas, are unmistakably Egyptian. This has led some scholars to suggest that the Exodus tradition preserves a folk memory of a group of people who spent time in Egypt, but not necessarily the same group that came from Mesopotamia. The story of the Exodus may be a composite of different traditions, reflecting the experiences of multiple groups that eventually merged into a single identity. The period of the Judges, as described in the Book of Judges, is a time of transition between the Exodus and the establishment of the monarchy. The book presents a series of charismatic leaders, or judges, who arose to defend the Israelites against their enemies. However, the archaeological evidence suggests a more gradual and peaceful process of settlement. Excavations of early Israelite sites reveal no evidence of widespread destruction or conquest. Instead, the population appears to have expanded gradually, with a continuity in cultural practices, such as pottery styles. This suggests that the Israelites were not a large invading force, but rather a group that gradually integrated into the existing Canaanite population. The stories of the judges, such as Deborah, Gideon, and Samson, may reflect the folk memories of local leaders who gained prominence in their communities. These leaders were likely Canaanites who adopted the traditions of the incoming Israelites, creating a hybrid identity that would eventually coalesce into the nation of Israel. The establishment of the monarchy marks a significant turning point in the history of Israel. According to the Bible, David and Solomon were powerful kings who built a mighty empire and constructed the first temple in Jerusalem. However, modern scholarship has cast doubt on the scale and grandeur of this kingdom. Archaeological excavations in Jerusalem and other sites have revealed that the city was not a major urban center during the time of David and Solomon. The biblical descriptions of their reigns as periods of great wealth and power are likely exaggerated. Instead, the kingdom of Israel, particularly in the north, was probably a smaller, more modest state. The Assyrian annals provide evidence of the northern kingdom of Israel, referred to as the House of Omri. These records show that Omri and his dynasty were powerful and influential rulers, even though the Bible portrays them negatively. The southern kingdom of Judah, on the other hand, was likely a poorer and less significant state during this period. The 8th century BC is a crucial period in the history of Israel. It is during this time that we have clear historical evidence for both the northern and southern kingdoms, and it is also when the first significant writings appear in the biblical tradition. The prophets of this era, such as Amos, Isaiah, Hosea, and Micah, provide a window into the social and political conditions of the time. The prophets were not just religious figures, but also social critics and political commentators. They spoke out against injustice, corruption, and the worship of foreign gods. Their messages were often unpopular and sometimes led to persecution, but they played a crucial role in shaping the moral and religious identity of Israel. The 8th century was also a period of relative peace and prosperity, as both Israel and Judah enjoyed a respite from foreign intervention. However, this period was short-lived, and by the end of the century, the northern kingdom had been conquered by the Assyrians. Judah, the smaller and more resilient state, managed to survive for a few more decades before falling to the Babylonians in the early 6th century BC. The Babylonian conquest of Judah in 597 and 586 BCE marked the end of the independent kingdom of Judah. The Babylonians took many of the leading figures, including the king, into exile, leaving behind a shattered and occupied land. This period, known as the Babylonian Exile, was a time of great suffering and reflection. The exile had a profound impact on the religious and cultural identity of the Israelites. It forced them to confront questions of faith and identity in a foreign land. The prophets of this period, such as Jeremiah and Ezekiel, provided a theological framework for understanding the exile as a period of divine punishment and a call to repentance. The exile also led to the development of new religious practices and institutions. The synagogue, a place of worship and community gathering, emerged during this period as a substitute for the destroyed temple. The Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, was likely compiled and edited during this time, providing a written record of the traditions and laws that defined the Israelite identity. The history of ancient Israel is a complex and multifaceted story. While the biblical narrative provides a rich and inspiring account, modern scholarship reveals a more nuanced and often surprising reality. The patriarchs, the Exodus, the judges, the monarchy, and the prophets, all these elements of the biblical story, have their roots in historical and cultural traditions. But they are also shaped by the needs and perspectives of later generations. The journey from the ancient Near East to the land of Canaan, from the Exodus to the monarchy, and from the prophets to the exile, is a story of transformation and resilience. It is a story that continues to resonate today, not just as a religious text, but as a testament to the human capacity for adaptation and survival in the face of adversity.